Thursday's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday. Tuesday, Casual Tuesday. Wednesday, Casual Hump Day. Thursday, Casual Thurs. That's what we call it. And Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, September 20th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal, the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Ben Dixon from the Benjamin Dixon Show be with us. Also, a special report from the New York City climate student strike protest from our chief youth correspondent, Myla Seder, who will be on the scene. Hopefully that'll work out.
Look out, Greta.
Also on the program today, the Trump-suppressed whistleblower complaint apparently involves a promise to Ukraine. Betsy DeVos tells Duke and UNC to make their Mideast Studies program more Judeo-Christian friendly or lose funding. Pentagon presenting Donald Trump with military options in Iran. Let's just hope that's chitter chatter. The massive student climate strike is on today, as I mentioned. Meanwhile, Pentagon claims they really need that money that Trump diverted to the wall, as Trump looks to divert more money to the wall. And the Customs Border Patrol issued a report a year ago blaming climate change for increased migration. Trump administration buried it. North America has lost 3 billion birds since 1970. Scientists are freaking out. Colt suspends its production of AR-15s. Of course, we'll still have plenty of knockoff AR-15s available for you. If you want to shoot up any type of public space. Bill de Blasio is out of the race. College students doubled their voting rate between 2014 and 2018. Could be a big story in 2020. Meanwhile, Mitch McConnell shuts down any type of gun control legislation in the Senate. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. It is Casual Friday. We have some guests in studio. I didn't realize he was wearing a shirt. There you go. Amy Klobuchar fan in the house. Glad to see that.
Glob gang.
Full complement of folks here today. It is Casual Friday. As such, I am wearing a soft-collared shirt. I hope you enjoy it. Only happens on Fridays when we have a casual dress day here for me. Everybody else dresses casually for the rest of the week as well.
True.
But welcome. As I said up front, we're going to hopefully hear from my daughter, who is somewhere downtown New York City at the climate protest, or at least I think making her way there from her school. She goes to school in Brooklyn. And my son already, apparently this morning, his first grade class marched around the school, went back in quickly. They made a show of it. So in New York City, the students are protesting all around in the schools. And the schools find it a good opportunity to talk about something that is real. Climate change is real. It's 2019. all sane human beings who are not either insane or lying for money know that climate change is real. And anyone who knows anything about education knows the best way to teach kids are to get them involved and enmeshed in a subject so they're not just reading it on a book to try and make it three-dimensional. So this is a great opportunity for educators, and I think everyone would agree with that, unless you belong to one of the two categories of people I just referenced. And of course, I bring you Fox News Channel today.
Thousands of kids across the country will be walking out of school today to demand action on climate change. Let's bring back our A-team, Juan Williams, Ed Henry, and Jenna Ellis Reeves. All right, Jenna,
Pause it. I just, I don't want to get too pedantic here on this day. But if this is the A-team, I would be very, very nervous to see the B-team. But go ahead.
Williams, Ed Henry, and Jenna Ellis Reeves. All right, Jenna, I'll start with you. When I hear kids partaking in protests, I just think, okay, whose idea was that? Whose idea was this?
Right. And, obviously, I think that kids can have their own opinions. I mean, my little brother has been very politically active and, has been a consumer of the news since he was probably 12. And so, we can't say that kids are always just informed by adults, but I think it's a valid question to say whose idea was this and on school time, right? Because this is also something that if you're going to make a, political move here, is this something that is being led by the school administration? Is it compelled? Is it something, all of these questions are very important, and especially when we're talking about something like climate change. I mean, this is something that, if you look at the Democratic left and you look at everyone on stage, they had a 7-hour debate over this. I mean, who even watched that?
Ed watched all of it.
Oh my God, pause it now for 1 second. I just want to walk through some of this here. Now, I remember the extended piece that the A-team did on all the children in church that they see, and who's responsible for that? I mean, sure, I've known some kids who pick up the Bible on their own, but I mean, how are all these kids getting to church? Who's putting that idea in their head? And then, of course, maybe she doesn't have a child who goes to school, but they take field trips all the time. They leave to things like historical places where maybe they'll learn about slavery. Now, I know that's also a political issue. Or they will go to places like, they go down to museums. I mean, the idea that somehow there's something particularly toxic, politically toxic about teaching kids and making kids aware of their ability to push back on something that threatens their very future is pretty bizarre. And then, of course, they talked about it for 7 hours. It's just stunning that that's actually they cut away from her saying that to a shot where you see America's newsroom right underneath there. And they talked about it for 7 hours. That's crazy. But let's hear Ed Henry, who comes in tries to have some semblance of self-respect that he's still on this network.
Something like climate change. I mean, this is something that, if you look at the Democratic left and you look at everyone on stage, they had a 7-hour debate over this. I mean, who even watched that?
Ed watched all of it.
That's
great. He did. He's got it on his Betamax. Betamax, right? You got Betamax?
Right. I got a Walkman, too.
Not even VHS, but Betamax.
I'm so sorry for you.
Look, my daughter's 15, and to your point about your family, I mean, she's very serious on climate change. She's been talking to me about it. She's following it. I think it's awesome. I think that young people being not just active, but engaged, caring about these big issues. In all seriousness, we like to joke around here. I think that's great, and we shouldn't dismiss it. But I think when they start walking out of class over it, just like they did that, I saw the same at my daughter's school, I think it was last year, about gun control. Again, I think it's very important. It's great for kids, young people, really, not kids anymore, young adults, to be active on these issues, to be educated about them, know the actual facts. But to just say, hey, you can be politically active, you don't have to go to class. I mean, they should be in school doing what they're doing to learn, right? And I think it's great they're learning about all these things, but just this political activism.
Here's the worst.
Yeah, wait a second. Now, poor Ed here is I need to be able to go home and look at my kid in the face and not say that I denigrated you for actually doing something that I secretly think is correct. But I do need to come up with something that is going to allow me to come on to the next episode of the A-Team. So I have to sort of mitigate this by saying, like, it's great that they're learning, but they should be in class because they're supposed to be learning. So you keep going. Unbelievable. You really threaded the needle on that one, Dad, as Ed Henry comes home. And
hey, Dad, I'm so sorry that you had to watch all of the climate forums. What a tough job you have.
Yeah, that must have been really difficult.
Isn't it weird how your workplace colleague couldn't watch all of them, but I did as a teenager?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, can we go back just to look on her face after she says that? Because I actually think for most of this, like, you know, like I posited up front that you need to be sort of out of your mind to not take climate change seriously, or you just need to be a paid lying shill. I think for most of what she was talking there, she was the paid lying shill. But I think in this moment where she actually reacts to the idea of like 7 whole hours of talking about climate
Seems
change.
genuine.
About ecological collapse.
Oh my God, boring.
The people are predicting literally the deaths by the end of the century of billions of people, possibly. And it's just like, you're going to dedicate 7 whole hours to that?
She is literally, if you guys have seen ContraPoint's climate change video, the character that ContraPoints plays who just wants to like drink champagne in the bathtub. And she's like, I don't want to know about this, you nerd.
Watch this.
Something, you know, all of these questions are very important, and especially when we're talking about something like climate change. I mean, this is something that, you know, if you look at the Democratic left and you look at everyone on stage, they had a 7-hour debate over this. I mean, who even watched that?
Ed watched all of it.
Look at her eyes. She like staring into the abyss.
What do you think about that? Do you even care?
There you go. But you know, we should say these protests are taking place across the globe. Millions of people participating in this.
So what you're saying is whoever's organizing this has global reach.
Of course. The global democratic left actually has promoted these marches in 156 countries around the world, including Nepal, Senegal, Quebec, Rome, Kyrgyzstan, Sweden, Bolivia, Peru. I think they were playing some footage from Poland.
South Africa.
There's 1.1 million school students in New York City who are going to be participating. So
it's a lot of people who want to put off the rapture and God's judgment.
I know it. I can't believe they would spend 7 hours, though.
Like, what are they so afraid of?
It's crazy. All right. Well, we will get to Ben Dixon in a moment. But first, support for today's show comes from Mova Globes. As I've said many times before, this is now like a regular staple. Saul keeps asking me, where's my globe? But these things are pretty awesome. They turn all on their own, with or without a base. You can see that. They sort of float in their covering. You can spin them, or it's a little bit hypnotic. I'm going to try and get through this without hypnotizing myself.
Tropes.
But there's no batteries needed, nothing like that. They come on a couple of different cases. I've got the acrylic one, or stands. I got the acrylic one right here. And they just, they sit on your desk. They sit on your mantle, wherever it is. They're over 40 different designs, including world maps, outer space, different planets, famous artwork. There's something for everyone. The Outer Space Collection even features a graphic that's provided by NASA, complete with planets, moons, asteroids, and constellation designs, and a version of like what the Earth looks like from space. Great gift for someone who has everything, or for kids, graduation, Hanukkah, and of course, you could also just use it as decor. I love having at least 1 or 2 globes around at all times, and so any derivation I can get. They have one where James Cook, the captain who he was a British explorer, and I don't know, it's like 1700s maybe, And so they have his paths around essentially the globe, or his voyages. There's no Antarctica because they didn't know about it at the time, which is pretty cool. They have the Van Gogh and Monet globes, a Mars globe. It's cool stuff. Check it out. And you can check it all out by going to movaglobes.com/majority. Use the code majority for 10% off your purchase. That's MOVA, movaglobes.com/majority. Use the code majority for 10% off your purchase. Of course, this will be in the podcast notes as well. Another sponsor of today's program, ZipRecruiter. As you know, hiring can be a laboriously slow process. For example, Cafe Altura's COO, Dylan Miskowitz, needed to hire a director of coffee for his organic coffee company who's having trouble finding qualified applicants. He switched to ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter does not depend on candidates finding you. It goes out, searches and finds and brings you candidates. Its technology identifies people with the right experience, invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. We've been there. We've done this. Brendan is a ZipRecruiter candidate that we ended up hiring. And, I mean, it's worked out pretty well, right, Brendan? Yeah, he says so. Miskowitz used ZipRecruiter's candidate rating to filter his applicants so he could focus on the most relevant ones, just like I did. I don't know. I must have brought in probably a dozen people, maybe. I don't want this to go to your head, Brendan, but that's how Dylan found his new director of coffee in just a few days, and that's how I found my new director of Brendan in a few days. That was one of the things that gave Brendan a leg up. It was named. I already had the name, and I just needed to find somebody who could fit in there. But with results like that, no wonder. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. And we did. I could have stopped after the first day, but nobody was named Brendan, and so that would have made it impossible. You can see why ZipRecruiter is effective for businesses of all sizes. ZipRecruiter, you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/majority. That's ZipRecruiter.com/majority. ZipRecruiter, ZIP recruiter.com/majority. ZipRecruiter, it's the smartest way to hire. All right, quick break. When we come back, Ben Dixon. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program the proprietor of the Benjamin Dixon Show, Ben Dixon himself. Ben, welcome back to the program.
Sam, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
So let's start with the what's going on in terms of impeachment and whistleblower complaint. This whistleblower complaint. I mean, they are unrelated at this moment in some respects, but I think they're related in terms of this battle that seems to be going on within the Democratic caucus, where we now have, I think, 136 Democrats who are on record in support of impeachment. That would leave, I don't know, about 80 some odd, or maybe about 100 plus who are not out publicly for impeachment at this point. Nancy Pelosi, there was a story in Politico 2 or 3 days ago that apparently about a week ago she was in chastising the staff members of the Judiciary Committee in front of the entire caucus and said, I don't care if this leaks out. Now, I mean, she clearly has been stifling this thing. We had some pretty interesting testimony, I thought, from Corey Lewandowski this week, particularly after he was, and almost specifically when he was questioned by the staff attorney, Barry Burke, I think is his name. And so, I mean, just put all this in context and we can get a little bit deeper into this whistleblower story, which seems to be drip dropping out. In fact, let's do this. Let's play this clip of Adam Schiff. Apparently, the story goes that a whistleblower went to the DNI, said, I've got a problem here with something, then went to the Inspector General of the Directorate of National Intelligence, and the IG said, this is a urgent, compelling issue that we find at least credible, and this whistleblower complaint by statute needs to be given to the relevant committees in Congress, and the DNI denied, basically suppressed this whistleblower complaint, supposedly on the orders of the Justice Department, which I don't know why they get to do this either. I mean, I don't know why anybody does. And the IG went to the House Intelligence Committee, testified behind closed doors as to what the nature of the complaint is. So Adam Schiff, presumably, in this clip, this was from yesterday at about 1 o'clock, knows what the complaint was. And here it is.
Mr. Atkinson wrote, I set forth the reasons for my concluding that the subject matter involved in the complainant's disclosure not only falls within the DNI's jurisdiction, but relates to one of the most significant and important of the DNI's responsibilities to the American people. This is what's being withheld from Congress right now. We do know that the Department of Justice has been involved in the decision to withhold that information from Congress. We do not know, because we cannot get an answer to the question about whether the White House is also involved in preventing this information from coming to Congress. We do not have the complaint. We do not know whether the press reports are accurate or inaccurate about the contents of that complaint. But what I do know is this: if in a matter within the jurisdiction of the Director of National Intelligence, you have an employee of that community or a contractor or detailee who follows the law and makes a complaint, and it is possible for the subject of that complaint to essentially quash the complaint or keep it from Congress, then this system is badly broken.
Okay, and let me just clarify one thing here. So apparently this guy Atkinson, who is the IG, he was not authorized to tell the committee anything of substance about the complaint. Only he was testifying as to his analysis that, in fact, from a statutory perspective, it was a legitimate complaint and needed to be communicated to Congress, which, of course, the DNI lawyer disagrees with. I mean, so this is another process thing that's being bogged down. But this is why, and we saw part of that this week with the Barry Burke, I think it is, or testimony, or I should say questioning of Corey Lewandowski. And that is, when you move into an impeachment mode, there are all sorts of rules changes to the process that can expedite things and shake things loose. And yet, Nancy Pelosi wants none of it.
That's the That's the refrain. That's the chorus. That's the hook of the song for the season, right? Nancy Pelosi, for whatever reason, doesn't want to impeach anyone. We saw it with Brett Kavanaugh. More evidence has come out against him. We're seeing it. And here's the disturbing part about this. It's not just that we have a president who is not only criminal in his own personal behavior, whether it reaches high crimes and misdemeanors, that's up for debate, and that's why we have the impeachment inquiry. But it's the fact that he has the ability to get different parts of this government to act in a manner that itself creates a constitutional crisis, right? The fact that we have the DOJ overstepping its bounds once again to suppress information that just so happens to be a threat to the president. And yet the one remedy that we have to actually address these issues, the Speaker of the House, the leader of the opposition party, if we can call it that at this point, chooses not to. And I'm still not clear as to why, because there's really no justification. If your fear is a political one, then you are literally putting politics before your job and before your oath. I mean,
let's putting that question aside for a moment, the politics one, because I think that, that's but I agree with you. It's stunning. And I've said this half a dozen times this week. I'll say it one more time. The framers of the Constitution, the people who wrote the Constitution, contemplated Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not the it was contemplated. He is not the moment that America doesn't become America. What the framers did not contemplate was to have Nancy Pelosi do nothing.
Right.
I mean,
right.
In light of like an incredibly unpopular president who is, the House impeached Andrew Johnson back in the day during Reconstruction because he was vetoing everything. He was being very difficult. He was acting erratically outside of office, et cetera, et cetera. And the case to impeach Donald Trump seems to me to be so much less partisan, right? Like, I mean, this guy is literally doing the things, even, it's his corruption is so old school that they, all of the commentary contemplate, we don't want somebody who's going to use the office to enrich himself with foreign powers. Like that's, it feels like what this whistleblower was talking about was very similar to that, whether I don't know if you're getting cash or if it's just like, we're going to get maybe some services in kind for the campaign by promising you things like, you go and do an investigation on Joe Biden's kid.
Joe Biden, yeah.
And we'll make it worth your while with a certain investment and God knows what they've gotten from the Saudis. When we look back on this era, putting aside politics for a moment, when we look back on this era, and we say, where was the failure of our institutions? The failure is not going to be in the presidency. The failure is going to be in the House.
Right. That's the surprising thing about it, right? Nancy Pelosi is uniquely positioning herself in history to be a bigger problem than Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump is essentially daring America to impeach him. He's saying, I'm going to do and everything that you could possibly imagine. It's almost as though he is uniquely designed to violate everything possible, the way he thinks. Like for him to offer a quote unquote bribe, it's not even a bribe to him. That's just how he does business. Right. But that's not how you run the presidency. That's not how you are the chief executive of this country. And yet he operates in that manner. And Nancy Pelosi just simply looks and says, we're going to leave it alone because for whatever reason. Now, in full transparency, I've put in a call. I'm supposed to have a conversation with someone who works on her team because I want to know, like, you and I, Sam, I think you and I might have been one of the few progressives to give her the benefit of the doubt when she was running for speaker. And because we know one thing about Nancy Pelosi, when she wants to get something done, she's going to get it done. Yes. And now we see that she does not want to get this done and there's absolutely no movement on it. So I just need to know why. People want to know why I'm like full throated against Nancy Pelosi. Well, they need to explain why she is not doing her job as Speaker of the House.
And so let's address this political question, right? Because in that same instance, when Johnson was impeached by the House, he was not impeached he was not convicted, I should say, by the
Right.
Senate, and so he wasn't removed. And my understanding of the history is the reason why he was not was because the Senate felt that that from a political standpoint, they didn't want to do that. That it would have been, better to run against him than to have him impeached. In part because they didn't have a vice president at the time, and that was that they ultimately decided on political grounds. But I don't understand the political calculation here. Okay, like I can understand the concept of she has a political reason, but the political calculation seems just befuddling to me. Now, maybe they feel like, look, we don't have the votes. We can't control the people in our caucus. But again, that cuts against what you and I both know about Nancy Pelosi.
Oh, yeah, certainly.
And it also cuts against the data that came out of 2018. I mean, it's one thing to say that if you're in a purple district, right, that you maybe can't come out for, a government control of all the major industries or something. But it's another thing to say that you can't come out against Donald Trump. I mean, these so-called frontline districts, this is not where Donald Trump won by 12 percentage points in 2016. These are ones where it was, evenly balanced. And to the extent that in 2018, people won in those districts, it was because they distanced themselves from Donald Trump, because they attacked Donald Trump. The ones that lost in these districts were ones that hewed too closely to Donald Trump. I mean, this is what that Bykofer, the pollster who had predicted this, the win in like June or May of 2018, her model showed this and makes that quite clear. And Nancy Pelosi seems to be just ignoring all of it.
You know what? I don't want to believe in 10-dimensional chess, but something just dawned on me. And I'm going to throw this out here and you tell me what you think. Perhaps it's timing, right? I've never seen Nancy Pelosi be just completely feckless in anything that she's attempted to do as Speaker of the House. She's been pretty vicious and pretty cutthroat and got things done. Maybe she's simply trying to time this. This is the only thing I can give her, Sam. It's a stretch. She's trying to time this so that during the election, we are in the impeachment inquiry, and we have not yet reached the stage where the Senate can find him not guilty or not convict him, rather. And so he doesn't have a political victory to go into the elections. Instead, during the entirety of the elections, he's mired in the inquiry. That could be the only reason I could see valid for her to hold out this long.
I suppose. I mean, if she thinks it's going to be more effective at that time from a political standpoint, and that you could have the vote in October of 2016, 2020, and then put it on the Senate. But I don't know. I'd like to see the Senate have to deal with this for like 3 or 4 months, and at least, right? And we're in September now. Yeah. We're almost in. I mean, I don't know, when is the magic time. The only thing that strikes me is that she either believes that she can't get the votes from the Democratic caucus in the House, which I find hard to believe.
Right.
Or she doesn't trust Chuck Schumer to do his job, and that and she's not convinced, because that would also be very problematic. I mean, if the whole idea is that you want the Senate, the Republicans in the Senate, to quash this, but I don't know how bad you'd have to be at your job if you're Chuck Schumer to not be able to deliver these votes. Like, I could see maybe Joe Manchin, maybe.
Certainly Joe Manchin.
Being the lone holdout, but that doesn't seem to me to expose too many House members. Although, I mean, that's, for the life of me, I'm befuddled by it. And the Lewandowski thing showed a little bit of a taste of what they could do with impeachment.
Again, like I said, that I can't think of any reason either But if I had to just really try, the only thing that makes sense is she's trying to get the timing right on it for political purposes. But again, your question is the one that's most paramount. When is the magic time then? When is the moment that she's going to strike? Because there is a lengthy period for the inquiry as well as the Senate hearing, the Senate trial.
I guess, we'll have a better notion going forward. I would think like this whistleblower thing might be able to give them the sort of like, the more impetus to push this stuff. But there is a quality of Nancy Pelosi being out of step, right? And just sort of like not understanding this political moment. The idea of being afraid of polarization is just absurd. You can't. There's times where you basically, polarize. And I'm talking. I want to pivot to Joe Biden here, who I think is also not of the moment. But a lot of this is just sort of like, look, you don't want to engage in the fight, but it's a dumb thing to say when someone is pounding on your face with their fist. Honestly, it's like, yeah, look, I don't believe in fighting. And so I'm not going to add to this as the person is pounding you into pounding your face. And that is the situation that we're going to have going into 2020. You're going to have a polarized electorate, and you're not going to be able to, it's not a question of convincing people who have already chosen sides. It's a question of mobilizing anybody who might be in any way sympathetic to your cause. And one, as we talk about this election, there was a stat that came out today about college students. They doubled their rate of participation from 2014 to 2020. To 2018. That's stunning. This is an off-year election. And that is, I think, pretty stunning. I have a feeling 2016 was not a banner year for college students to vote. And I imagine they're going to come out, with a similar dynamic. And if that holds true, I guess we'll see maybe some of that in the primary season. But we have the polls. I know you've been sort of banging the drum on this thing of the intra-scene squabbles on the left. Just give me your sense of where everything sits at this point.
Well, let me start with Joe Biden, right? He is so out of step, and it was weird that we saw Pete Buttigieg kind of parrot some of that same those same talking points as we don't want to be too polarizing. But like you said, we are in the height of hyperpolarization in this country. I can't imagine us getting more polarized. And what is going to diminish the vote, the turnout on our side, is for someone who is not willing to engage in the fight. The people want a fighter. They want a champion who can take it to Donald Trump the way he's been taking it to us over the last, even beyond his presidency, since before his presidency. So Joe Biden is completely out of step in that way. And if he survives the primaries and gets the general election, he certainly is not going to mobilize the people if he's talking about not engaging in the fight. We honestly need a street fighter in this election. In terms of the primaries and the bitter divide, I think the number one thing that we need to focus on the left, progressives, is to get rid of Joe Biden. There's a lot for us to discuss between everyone else, but the first and foremost thing we need to do is make sure that we're telling people not to vote for Joe Biden, because not only will he lose, but he'll depress the vote for, who knows how long it would take for us to recover from another 4 years of Trump, because we elected or we nominated someone like Joe Biden who wants to not get into the fight.
I'm convinced, that of the viable candidates at this point in the Democratic primary, that Biden represents the biggest risk because of the reason you're talking about. I'm terribly scared about it.
Absolutely.
Let me ask your opinion on this, because Biden's strong, most prominent strength at this point seems to be older African-American voters. And predominantly in the South. And what is, I have a theory about, I have a theory about what concerns me about this cohort. I think this cohort is going to come out and vote for whomever is the Democratic nominee.
Yep.
Right? Because they're heavily, heavily invested in Donald Trump losing. I mean, we all are, but I think, there are reasons why if you were an African-American and particularly an older one, why you would be like, that is paramount. Everything else is secondary because they have more experience with the implications of someone like this. But they also are an incredibly reliable vote. I'm convinced that and I haven't seen any data on this, and I would love someone to poll it, but it's probably just not worth it for whomever. But if Biden's support comes from people who are reliable Democratic voters, that is not terribly helpful in terms of an argument as to why he needs to be the nominee. Whereas, hypothetically speaking, there's another candidate who brings out African-American voters who are marginal insofar as their reliability to vote at any given time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a spot on analysis. Here's the problem that we face, though, and this is why it's so critical that we don't waste time bickering in the primaries, is that those reliable Democratic voters who are going to support or who currently support Joe Biden, they're going to come out in the primaries. They're going to be the ones who show up. They're already registered. They don't have to beat the deadline to register in their state. They've been registered Democrat all their life. And so they are going to be the ones to show up in the primaries. The real question is how well organized is every other campaign, particularly Warren and Sanders? Are they organized enough to make sure that they can rival those votes during the primaries? Or are we using our energy to fight one another when we all should just be registering the hell out of everyone we possibly can and making sure they know their primary dates and making sure that they have the energy and the motivation to actually show up, because Joe Biden voters are going to show up if no one else does.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And, I'm looking at it's sort of fascinating what's going on now within the media. And I don't know how important it is, frankly. And I could make an argument that it's disadvantageous for Bernie Sanders, but I also could say that it's to his advantage that the media does not take him seriously at this juncture. Mm-hmm. But the latest California poll, Sanders tied for first. Latest New Hampshire poll in the Boston Herald, Sanders in first place. Mm. The newest Iowa poll from CBS, Sanders 3% behind Biden. Latest Nevada poll, Sanders in first. Latest South Carolina poll, also from CBS, Sanders in second. I mean, that's a good place to be in. He is ignored in every conversation that I have seen. It's bizarre. And I think, there is an argument that at least nationally, his numbers have been pretty static. Consistent throughout. But when you're talking about, and you could also argue that when you look at second choice voting in these instances, he's sort of down on the list. Even in some instances in Iowa, I've seen polls where Buttigieg is more second choice than Bernie. But I mean, you really have to go deep into the crosstabs to make an argument that Bernie Sanders is not as viable as Biden or Warren. I mean, it's bizarre.
Yeah, anyone making that argument at this point is completely disingenuous and just change the channel. The problem is there's so many people on so many channels who are carrying those talking points. And I don't know if it was on your show. It was pretty recently, though, that I discussed that these people have a vested interest in keeping Bernie out of the conversation, because not only as consultants and not only as the consulting class, the Democratic establishment, their entire livelihood is centered around the machine as it exists today, both in the media, consulting world, political world, fundraisers, PACs. It's built off of the way the world is structured right now. And so who's the biggest threat to that structure? It's going to be Bernie Sanders. And so they have every incentive, whether they would admit it or not. We know they have an incentive to keep Bernie out of the conversation as much as they possibly can. But still, despite all that, he's performing and he's outperforming in a lot of ways.
I like you, am convinced that the best chance that a progressive has to win, which includes, I don't care if you're a Warren supporter or a Bernie supporter, the best chance for your candidate to win is if it's a three-way race deep into this race. Because as soon as it's a two-way race, the candidate on the left, whether it's Warren or Sanders, is going to get the 100% of that fire. And I think part of the reason why Bernie's left out of the conversation is so that the critique, the most leftward critiques can be aimed at Warren. Where, and so I think that's what they're trying. I don't know if it's a conscious effort. I just think that it's like more comfortable for them to do this. And I think, that is my, argument as to why you don't want, if you're a Warren fan, you don't want Bernie out of the race now. If you're a Bernie fan, you don't want Warren out of the race right now. You don't want to be, the real concern, I think, for folks is Buttigieg, to be honest with you. Because he's got a lot of money, and he's like a number. I'm looking at this. There's a poll from Iowa State University, and when you're talking about like second place, if the Democratic caucus were held today, which of the following candidates would be your second choice? Warren is in the lead for this question with 18%. Buttigieg comes in second. 14%. And so, then you got Kamala Harris, then you got Biden, then you got Bernie. And so I would be very concerned about Pete Buttigieg at this point from the left. Joe Biden is going to be Joe Biden. And I think it's quite possible. I think people also should have that concern. But Buttigieg seems to me to be the threat, at least in the beginning. And then it's just a question of if Sanders' numbers here for California and New Hampshire and Nevada and South Carolina hold, he's in very good shape. Let me ask you this. Is there room, getting back to those older African Americans who are supporting Joe Biden, and I couldn't answer this question. And my grandparents, my grandparents, at least my grandmother, she spent the winter in like the Boynton Beach area of Florida.
Oh yeah, I used to live there.
And I don't know if you ran into her at any point, but I remember Sarah Silverman doing the Great Schlep, which was during the 2008 campaign, trying to get young Jews to tell their grandparents not to be such bigots and vote for Barack Obama, which is basically what it came down to. And I don't know what percentage, I don't know if that was effective at all. I have no idea. I feel like I could have convinced my grandmother to stay at home. I don't know who she voted for at the time, but at the very least, I feel like I could convince her to stay at home by telling her the wrong date on the election. But do you think that something similar? I just saw a piece in the Times talking about this. Do you think that there's something similar? Because certainly Sanders does much better with a younger African-American cohort than he does with an older one, which is across the board. Same with white people too, for that matter. But do you think that there's like, would something like that be effective?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's actually happening, right? And you're mentioning the piece by Steve Herndon. He wrote, and it came out yesterday or today. This is the only way it's going to happen, right? The younger generation, younger Black folks who are far more steeped in far more online and know the information, understand the necessity for Medicare for all, understand the risk. They understand the risk that they're up against. They're actively trying to convince their parents to just leave Joe Biden alone. How much of a change will that make? What percentage are we talking about? I don't know, but I do know that it's an effective strategy because your parents, it's funny. the older you get, the more your parents will listen to you, right? That's a phenomenon. Like I was able to convince my mother to change her vote as well. I got her off of Biden. And so I think if everyone actually tried to employ that across the board, but particularly in the African-American community, we can shake that loose. A lot of people just feel comfortable with Joe Biden because of Barack Obama. They feel comfortable with Joe Biden because, at least his racism is baked in and they become accustomed to the taste of his racism. But if you shake them up a little bit and just show them how informed you are, how active you are, and how passionate you are, your parents would probably come along with you. I know it kind of sounds like, kind of mushy and everything else, but that's really where we are at this point. Here's another way to think about it. I don't really want to mention it, but with the Working Families poll, one thing I noticed was there was a lot of activity on the Warren side with one-on-one conversations, personal text messages, personal phone calls to people to actively say, hey, we want you to support this candidate. And ultimately, it went in that direction. I think we cannot neglect the one-on-one relationships that we have and our ability to convince that one person in our house or those 10 people in our immediate sphere of influence that if nothing else, Joe Biden is not the pick. I think that's the preeminent message. You can argue over Warren and Sanders, but we all should agree that Biden has to get out of the way.
I mean, it's much easier to just say, rather than convince somebody to vote for someone and just say, like, your choice is just not viable. Right. And because that's when this race starts to shake loose. I mean, the idea that this is going to be a two-person race at this stage of where the polls are, I think is people are deluding themselves. And it is much better for the left, from my perspective, to have two candidates of the left that are there. Now, I know there are some who would, there's obviously critiques of Warren. There's critiques of Bernie, but nevertheless, when you look at this field, there is, I think, to the extent that it's binary, they're on the left, and the rest of the folks are not.
Yeah, and I honestly don't believe that Warren and Sanders are going to cannibalize each other's voters. Like I think that the Venn diagram between those voters is spaced out enough so that is a viable strategy, right? Most people are going to say we don't want them both in the race because they're going to pull from each other. But if this week is in any indication, and the way the cohorts are lining up and the lines are being divided, there seem to be enough differences between those two camps to be able to use each other to fight back against Biden together versus tossing one of those candidates out of the race.
Lastly, I just should say that apparently I just got texted from my sister. My grandmother did vote for Obama.
Ah, there you go.
So all's well that ends well. Ben Dixon, always a pleasure, man. I'm glad to have an opportunity to talk to you about this because obviously this is like a big topic, probably mostly online at this point.
Yeah.
But so much of our assessment, my understanding is 9% of Democratic voters have settled on their candidate. And so there's a lot of room for change. But Ben Dixon, folks can check out the Benjamin Dixon Show on YouTube, right? Or you can find it as a podcast. And I hope people are listening to your program on a regular basis.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sam. It's always a pleasure, man.
Ben, we'll talk again soon. Thanks. All right, folks, going to take a quick break, and we will go to the chief youth correspondent of the Majority Report. I hope. I don't know. She's calling me freaking out, and but that could be anything. That could be just a function of she wants her allowance or something like that. But we will take a quick break and hopefully talk to my daughter, who is hopefully at the climate protest in New York City. Back on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program as our chief youth correspondent for the Majority Report, Myla Seder. Myla, where are you right now?
I am near City Hall.
And what's going on? Are there any other people there?
Yeah, there's like basically, from what I can tell, maybe 1 million. Something like that. There's so many people here. It's insane.
Well, just give me a sense of like, where are you looking out on? Like, are they all students from all around the city?
It's insane how many kids I saw. Like there's so many high schoolers here, and there's so many kids here, and there's like everyone's here, and some people are just trying to get through, and I feel bad for them, but it's truly amazing.
And so are there people carrying signs? I mean, what are people doing?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so many people are carrying signs right now. It's insane. And we're trying, me and my friend are trying to find Greta Thunberg. Oh wait, this is a shade. Oops. Dad?
Yeah?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, you can hear all the screaming. I think people are starting to move. I'm not sure where everyone is.
And so, are there speakers there, or
Yes. So I think people are waiting for Greta Thunberg. I'm not sure where she is. That's what me and my friend are trying to do right now. And then I know famous celebrities are going to be here, like Jaden Smith, Willow Smith. That's all I know right now. But there might be other people.
And well, let me get a sense. So why are you doing this aside from obviously seeing some of your top celebrities? But why are you doing this?
Because I feel like it's like we're the next generation, yeah, and we have to kind of we can't just sit back and let it happen, because we're clearly we're gonna end up, stuff's gonna happen, and we're gonna end up I don't know, we have to, yeah, if we don't do anything about this, the world's gonna go into crisis. Not necessarily in 17 months or 12 years, but it's going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. So what we're trying to do is just kind of make a statement that we're the future, we're the next generation, and we're not going to let this slide, you know?
And what was the how excited are your friends and the other students? To do this, or does everybody sort of have share that sense and let me...
Everyone shares that sense. It's amazing. It's amazing. Everywhere I go, it's there's the enthusiasm is just 100%, 155 billion%. It's so many people are just so it's so much in power, from our generation. There's so many kids from all over New York City just coming here to protest and stuff.
Do you guys, do your friend, how much do you guys fret about this? How?
Well, what do you mean?
How much when all the difficulty in being in 8th and 9th grade and stuff like that. How much of an extra burden is this on you guys? Do you guys talk about this when you're hanging out, or how much does it come up in between your conversations with your friends?
Oh, it's honestly, it's insane. Many people are, talking about it. Many people are excited about it. It's just, it's insane. It's a great movement, and everyone's really happy about it.
But I'm not talking about this particular protest or the movement, but when you guys are hanging out, when you're hanging out with your friends, or when you're at school and you're just, shooting the stuff with each other, how often does this come up? Do you guys, is this an ongoing concern, or is it just something that's in the background?
Well, honestly, I think that it's not necessarily in the background, but it is one of my main concerns, and it is one of many concerns, and that's what people care about a lot. But being a teenager is difficult, and it's you have so much to worry about, and then you kind of have to worry about this too, because this is your future. So I would say many people are super aware of it and super caring about it, because there's so many, you can hear, there's so many people here. Everywhere I'm walking, there's just crowds and yelling and screaming. It's just the most it's so interesting and it's crazy how many people you see here. And it's like you run into people that you haven't seen in ages. And it's just like, it's an amazing thing. It's so amazing. It's just like seeing everything.
So what do you think you're going to do? I mean, after this, I mean, what do you guys have a sense of like what the next steps are?
I mean, like, honestly, I hope that this protest kind of makes people realize, like, makes the older generation realize that, like, there is an issue going on and that, like, the new generation's not afraid to stick up for it. We're about to be in a huge crowd, so I might lose you.
Okay. Well, is there anything else that you wanna tell us about what's going on down there, or just in general?
Well, I can tell you that it's the most it's like 10 times the size of the climate march. It's 10 times the size of the climate march from March of 2019.
Right.
So it's amazing. It's super cool.
All right. Well, good luck. Stay safe.
Thank you. I will.
All right. I'll talk to you later. I'll see you probably
all right.
in a couple hours.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Good job. There she is,
Wow.
Chief.
The kids are all right.
Kids are all right. And I hope they, like, you know, it's a lot to ask of a ninth grader to start organizing. There are obviously some kids who who are more in tune with that. But I think this is good. It's going to be interesting to see what comes out of something like this, because I don't remember another instance of such a student-dominated protest with this many people. And I got to imagine it's going to. I mean, I brought Myla down to Occupy a couple of times, and it was intimidating for her to be around that many people protesting. We got caught up in a couple of marches occasionally, and
That many white dreadlocks would also be intimidating.
there was a whole bunch of stuff that was intimidating. But you know, you get to a certain age, and then you feel a little more confident. And I wonder I would imagine we're going to see some organizations and some organizing and more protests coming out of what we've seen this week. And I don't know how much the message will resonate. We watch this Fox News report, and everybody's just like, I can't believe they're 7 hours. I mean,
well, the scary part is the people in power are free to ignore it.
Yep.
We saw that with the Iraq War. Millions of people protested and it didn't do anything.
That's true. That's true. But hopefully this will resonate more. And I hope there are, campaigns out there. I mean, I guess there's not a lot of people to register because a lot of these people are not going to be voting age. Although I would imagine the seniors, right, will be 18 by next year. By next November, I mean, certainly. And it'll be interesting to note what percentage. I mean, we're talking about 1 million students supposedly in New York City. I don't know if they're all down there, but 1 million students, I don't know what the percentage of that would be seniors, but 100,000.
Yeah, and even if they can't vote, there are lots of different ways that they can get involved. Obviously, I mean, YDSA has chapters all over the country with kids as young as high school.
There you go. All right. We're going to take a break, go into the fun half of the program. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Should get some some type of Myla branded swag. Maybe that might be.
She's gonna be all of our boss someday, isn't she?
Yeah, she's already mine.
Whoa!
Already mine.
You delivered that way too convincingly. Man.
Yes.
I felt your exhaustion.
Oh my God! But she did a great job. I'm very proud. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Check out the AM Quickie. Just about to send the Quickie off on its own into the world, on its own little feed. So check it out today. Super easy for you at the moment. All you got to do is check your Majority Report audio podcast feed or sign up for it or just visit it, listen to one. Every morning we get them out the door now. Brendan, when are we getting them out the door now? By almost 8:30 every day, right? Pretty close. So today is Friday. Yesterday was Thursday. The day before that was Wednesday. The day before that was Tuesday. What happened on Tuesday, Michael?
Oh, what happened this previous Tuesday was, Jesus Christ, Emma Vigeland. I literally forgot for a second.
It was all the way back on Tuesday.
Wow. That was a you moment right there. And coming up this Tuesday, I'm very excited to be welcoming Michaela Wilkes to the show. She's running for Congress. She's challenging Steny Hoyer. We talked with Shahid Buttar about his campaign to replace Nancy Pelosi, and now we'll talk with Michaela about her campaign to replace Steny Hoyer. I really could not imagine a bigger upgrade in every way, shape, and form.
Huge upgrade.
Insanely big upgrade. A real progressive, real left candidate with who speaks actually very movingly and cogently about her life experience in a non sort of a very genuine way. And then also Mike Racine and I are going to be talking about politics and movies, starting with this new ad for this. Have you seen the new I forget the guy from The Office is starring in a new Amazon series with the most stunning pro-Venezuela war propaganda.
Oh, John Krasinski and Jack Ryan.
No.
And so we are going to go a little bit on a tour of Hollywood militarism with some
if Jim
Sam
wasn't
Harris.
depressing before.
Sorry?
If Jim wasn't depressing before, Jim Halper, you wait.
There's a lot of people who don't know that the Department of Defense underwrites a lot of Hollywood films.
Well,
that
what we're
was
going to
a
get.
big story back in the aughts.
So that's kind of what we're going to be getting. We're going to, on the more sort of substance end, we'll get into that, but we'll also just be watching some schlocky movies and making fun of them. Patreon.com/TMBS. Michael Brooks Show on YouTube. First 76,000 subs. Thanks, everybody.
The one of the other benefits of getting rid of Steny Hoyer, in fact, probably the biggest benefit beyond just upgrading a specific congressperson, is Steny Hoyer, the way that he has been able to maintain power in the House and get discipline is by having enough corporate donors that he doesn't have to worry about raising money for himself, being able to go out and raise money for others, and to get rid of that influence in the House. It'll undoubtedly go to some other corporatist, but you're still diluting it to a certain extent. So that's great.
Big. And just could you imagine just every element of that win? I mean, and Shahid too. Shahid's great as well. Yep.
And just broadly speaking, challenging primaries against, I think, all Democratic candidates, frankly, is an extremely healthy thing. And
except for Ed Markey with Joe Kennedy. Joe Kennedy absolutely sucks.
Get out of here.
Yeah, he doesn't even. There's no old style Kennedy fun or glamour. It's just all entitlement. And Ed Markey's actually really not half bad.
I wouldn't hesitate in a moment to vote for Markey, but broadly speaking, I am pro challenge. Sure. Keep everybody on their toes. I don't think Kennedy is an upgrade from to Markey at all, but I will take all these challenges over non-challenges. But yes,
there is such a thing as a primary from the right, like what they're planning to do to the squad.
Yeah, absolutely. And frankly, I'm not convinced that Joe Kennedy is not a primary from the right of Markey, frankly. Yes, Warren endorsed Markey. AOC endorsed Markey. I mean, I think they saw this coming down the pike, as it were, the mass pike. Anyways, Jamie.
Oh, my God.
Yep.
So this week on the Antifada, Sean and Andy dropped an emergency episode on the UAW strike. So if you really want to understand what's going on with that strike, its significance to the labor movement, and its historical context, I highly, highly recommend it. That means that we pushed our episode with Aaron Bastani till next week. We already recorded it. It's very good, if I do say so myself. We talk about his book, Fully Automated Luxury Communism, bring up some of the critiques that people have brought to it. And yeah, we had a good conversation. Also, this weekend, we're recording a new episode with people from No New Jails, and I'm very excited to talk about the prison abolition movement.
Matt.
We talked about it earlier, the disappearance of 3 billion birds since 1970s. Hear about an earlier instance of Americans killing off what was about 2/5 of the bird population by massacring just the passenger pigeon by the hundreds during right after the American Revolution.
This is why we can't have nice things.
All right, quick break. See you.
Sorry, that's in the Pioneers episode of Literary Hangover.
See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up! Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
what's up, everybody?
Sudden Walter Block said, do you remember? I remember sitting there and Walter Block just out of nowhere went, hey, shut up. And we all looked at each other like, oh.
Well, I was talking and he, yes, I remember sitting in the studio. He was saying that to me.
That was incredible.
So many memories.
Right. There was a lot of stuff that he said that was pretty sort of stunning in many respects.
It was so funny. And Sam was like, we got to be serious. This is an economics
Look,
professor.
I didn't know who the guy was.
I'm not dissing you. I'm just saying it was a very funny contrast.
Take it seriously.
You were like, this is going to be a debate with a serious academic.
He's a professor?
Yeah.
Sam,
first of all, shut up. Secondly,
right,
is the man at the Walgreens obligated to have sex with you? Well, then, no desegregation. I rest my case. By the way, barely an exaggeration. Maybe even less so than what he actually said. People should really watch that. Look up Walter Block if you haven't seen that yet. from the crates.
So I'm going to see, and apparently it's sold out, Billy Bragg at the Brooklyn Library next week as he in a conversation with Amy Goodman.
Lucky you.
I am lucky. Brendan got me a ticket right before it sold out, I think. And we had Billy Bragg on the show the other day, as you know. And in his pamphlet, he mentions Eric Weinstein, who is one of these people. He works for Peter Thiel, and then he has his own now podcast. He is one of the IDW guys. Supposedly he coined this phrase that despite the fact that he's obviously got a pretty decent position in society with Peter Thiel, and that he has access to all of these IDW platforms, that they feel like they are somehow in the dark web. Now, the dark web, as you know, is where a lot of like Nazis hang out, and neo-Nazis and white supremacists, and also, I would imagine, people who are doing illicit things.
Yeah, I was going to say,
right.
Don't forget about the drug deals.
Right, and a lot of drug deals. But the idea is that they're not allowed to have that, because of their ideas, which are because of their ideas, that they are not allowed to have a public forum. They have to have a secret forum, almost like if you were, let's say, practicing religion in certain societies, or you wanted to hide the fact that you were celebrating Shabbat under Nazi occupation, and you had to do it in the dark, and you had to do it secretly in secret
they're
tunnels.
so quiet and secretive about their opinions.
Right. As opposed to, let's say, being able to go on to a show that has a couple of million views, or being able to get a book deal, or being able to tour, or being sponsored by, I don't know, Turning Points USA, or, I mean, on and on and on. And so Billy Bragg and Weinstein had this exchange where, and I don't know how this initiated.
I'll look that up now.
It's a little bit weird, right? I mean, I can't quite tell how Weinstein has, but I don't know if Billy Bragg initiated it or not. But so Eric Weinstein said, so I'm not welcome in front of your audience on your upcoming dates to discuss this or show some solidarity and any coming together, right? Billy Bragg wants to pull people apart. And Billy said, no, thanks. I'm interested in how you square your statement about refusing to engage with certain arguments that you don't consider intellectually rigorous with the IDW's supposed commitment to free speech. This is the point that got you all fired up. Can you address it? And so here's how Eric addresses it. Of course, because of his openness to debate and the importance and the esteem in which he holds the exchange of ideas. So I was open to exposing protest singer and cultural icon Billy Bragg and his claims against me to my audience. I was willing in exchange to go on to his stage where he has home court advantage. I don't know what that means, but it's a real shame that Eric perceives this as some type of game where one would have home court advantage.
Can you imagine bringing him up on stage in the middle of a performance?
Well,
I'm sorry, I know
it's just so unfortunate,
bad entertainment
that you
right
need
there.
to look at it like that, as opposed to just simply a platform. And I'm sorry, go back to the other one. To show his audience that he was straw manning me. It was not to be. Door still open. Now, I find this to be fascinating, because if this is really about ideas, certainly, I think people who watch this show and know that I've been doing this for 10 years in this iteration and been doing this for 15 years, and I think I've been quite explicit about a whole range of ideas. I made a similar proposition to Eric Weinstein some time ago when he, and I should say that He's never, I never brought him up in any context, as far as I know. I mean, maybe, but I don't know. But he went on to make an accusation about what I was engaged in on Joe Rogan's show with a huge following, of course. Here it is.
I think that there's a very strange thing going on, not with Dave Rubin, but with the crowd of people that is just trying to eat Dave Rubin and blind him and confuse him. And there's this guy, Sam Seder, who...
Do you think he's a Russian?
I hope he is. Well, I don't know. I don't think he's Russian, but I do think that I think he has a grassroots following. I don't think this is inauthentic. That just loves to harass, dunk, drag. I hate this language. I just
like
can't.
Dunking. I like the word dunking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's fun.
No, I'm not a fan.
No,
because it cheapens all conversation. Oh, you got dunked on. You got dragged.
You're home court advantaged.
This is that thing in third grade that
I think Eric never has home court
Well, they
advantage.
found out that he won't engage with them, and so they think it's cute to just constantly shit on him, and they also think it's cute to take anything that he says and interpret it in the worst possible way possible, and not think of it as him just being a guy who's trying to talk about things on the fly.
Right.
And maybe isn't even prepared about the subject at hand. Like one of the things that comes up on this show.
Tough defense.
Like, we were talking before we were going to go on there. What are we going to talk about? I'm like, come on, let's just talk.
Yeah.
And so when you do that, come on, let's just talk thing.
Yeah.
You never know what the fuck is going to come up, and you might have a piss poorly formed idea of what a subject is, and you just start rambling.
Yeah, that's what I've done in my two previous
Well, no, you have not, but it seems, it's easy to think that you did that. But with Dave, there's enough moments where he's misstepped where they just feel like, okay, we got a wounded antelope.
Yeah. They're trying to pick him off. And, I think there was probably a move to do Shapiro, and there was a period where you were seemingly
Now, I just want to address, first off, look, I understand maybe you don't realize you're going to be talking about Jesus on any given day, but if you don't have the basic understanding to know that Jesus and Muslims were not contemporaneous, then maybe you should really, really do your best to stay away from anything remotely close to talking about that. I guess you could say, look, I didn't realize that we were going to be talking about, I don't know, the planets. So I messed up in knowing that the sun was not inhabited. There's some baselines here, but I don't know why Eric Weinstein felt it was necessary to bring up my name in the context of people who have a problem with Dave Rubin. I don't know what it means to blind somebody with criticism on Twitter. But
he is correct that we want to eat Dave Rubin, though.
Here is Eric Weinstein. Apparently, he just learned by watching my show.
Or somebody snitched.
Yes, that's somebody snitched. And the fact is, I asked Eric to discuss publicly with me what is going on with Rubin. I invited him onto my show. I said I would go on to his show, but nothing. He doesn't want to engage. Now, I don't know if it's because he doesn't perceive that I have the proper size audience, or that in some way, but it's interesting to me the way that he decides whose criticism he will address and whose he won't. And that he feels it's okay to invoke my name on a platform that I don't have access to, and at least imply that somehow I am, using my followers to corral a wounded antelope.
With a permaswarm.
Or something. And allow Rogan to characterize it as something that I think is cute. I don't do this for cuteness. It's not why I do it. It's incredibly demeaning. Cute is the way you describe a little puppy or a little kitten or a little child. I'm not being cute here. I actually think that what these people are doing is incredibly dangerous. I think it creates a lot of societal ills, very, very extreme societal ills. I think actually that in many respects, it provides support for some of the worst things that are happening in our society today. I don't think that's cute. And I am happy to discuss this more with Eric Weinstein. And if apparently it takes him a day or so to hear what we say on this program. Maybe he'll hear it now. Maybe you talk to me first, and then maybe Billy will see that you can actually have and engage with people with whom you disagree with. And maybe he will then respond more positively to your request. You're worried about not being welcome in front of Billy Bragg's audience? You're welcome in front of mine. There it is. So come on, let's discuss this. We can talk about Dave Rubin. We could talk about Ben Shapiro, whoever else you invoked in that segment with Joe Rogan. I'm happy to have this conversation. I look forward to it. And I am sure because of your intellectual rigor, you're an incredibly smart guy. I have no doubt. I've listened to you speak. I have no doubt that you're far more intelligent than I. But I still think that my ideas are worthy of engagement. So when you come on, you'll have the opportunity to make your case. I'll have the opportunity to make my case. So we'll see if you actually have the integrity of the principles you espouse. Because I have no doubt that you have the intellect. But the question is, you make these pronouncements about what's so important in our discourse, but you don't follow through. You only follow through when you think that maybe, I don't know why you would engage in this way when I've invited you and you know what I'm about. You know it very well, and I know it that you know it very well. So we'll see.
You know what I'm about. What's up, Irv Gotti? Look at Sam's language changing. I love it.
I went on. I did a.
You know what I'm about.
I did a segment with Irv Gotti on Ari Melber's Fallback Friday, and we went deep into it. At one point, I meant to bring this up with Ben Dixon. Irv Gotti said, "Look, I never voted. I don't vote." And he said, like, kids, you should vote, but I don't vote because he voted for Obama because he just thought it would be interesting to see what happens if a black guy gets into office. But he was like, beyond that, he was like, I didn't grow up thinking that government could do anything for me, and that it's up to me. And he asked me, and I don't know if this will make it to air. He asked me, like, did you grow up thinking government could do something for you? And I said, well, I grew up thinking that government could be used to do something for other people. And I think in another context, I would have said, but I understand, particularly as a black person in this country, that you would not feel that way. But I will say this, that I'm not convinced there is a circumstance where someone with Irv Gotti's perspective could be convinced otherwise, period. Like, I don't know that anybody could show up and say to him, I'm going to provide for you this, this, and that, and get that guy to vote. It sure didn't sound like it. I think it was the context in which he was coming from. Now, it's conceivable that, like, down the road, you could prove it to him by actually delivering. But that's very different than hearing something that would inspire him to vote.
Well, that's true, but and also there's different there's different, like, class configurations to that dynamic as well, because Irv Gotti is an incredibly successful business
Well, I'm
guy.
not talking now. I mean, I think he obviously, this is an attitude that he developed not since becoming
I think if
successful.
you step outside of, a pretty narrow set of circles, to be honest, and you go to any type of different class and racial, groups, that's a very common sentiment.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
heard people from a variety of really any type of background that I would not describe as basically, affluent, express some version of that sentiment.
Yeah, and it's hard to tell them that they're wrong when they've got so much evidence in that point of view's favor. But I mean, it is possible. Like, I think Russell Brand voted for the first time to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. The grime artist JME
He
was
voted for
talking.
Miliband too.
Well, I'm not talking about
it.
I'm not
And-
talking about.
He hosted at Miliband.
And then we saw. I mean, we also saw like a young woman of color on camera saying Jeremy Corbyn could suck my dick. Labor's never done anything for us, and that's in the UK, obviously. But I think there are similar sentiments going on here.
Right. I mean, that's my point. Is that I don't know that. I mean, putting aside whether it's justified or not, I don't know that you can convince someone of that.
Well,
I don't know that you can dispossess someone of that belief.
Well,
I think
Corbyn
obviously, if you're talking about someone like who has attained a certain amount of wealth or acclaim or something like that, they're exposed to they're in a different context, and maybe they start to think like, whoa, I got things to lose. But it also seems like a lot of those people may also just be like, I'm going to go with the guy who's going to give me the 20% tax break because I'm incorporated as a loan out corporation. I don't know. I think it's just something interesting to contemplate. I haven't even called into the thing. I haven't done any of the stuff that I'm supposed to do as a host. I apologize. Gosh darn it. Here's John Delaney. I heard, is this from the MSA? Okay, so today's Friday. Okay, so this is a Chris Hayes thing, right? This is the Chris Hayes climate thing, and he sat down with a bunch of different candidates. I heard one reporter on Twitter say after, I don't know who it was that left the stage. Maybe it was Sanders had left the stage. And Hayes said, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking to John Delaney. And, people had got up and they were just like, pfft. If he had said, I'm talking to John Mulaney, I'd be here. But I'm not going to. There's no point. And here is John Delaney with his proposal to deal with the urgent crisis of climate change. This is fascinating.
And if we ever want to get something done big on climate, it's going to have to be done in the Congress of the United States by passing laws. And the best way to pass big transformative laws is to get bipartisan support. So I introduced the only bipartisan bill.
All right, so nothing will happen.
Is there anybody in the room that can tell me, and maybe you'll have some disagreement about it specifically, but what is the conventional wisdom, let's just do it that way, I'll qualify it that way, of what the most recent transformative law that has been passed in the United States in the past decade? What is it?
The transformative law would be the ACA, would be
the
conventional
ACA,
system.
Obamacare. Can anyone tell me how many Republican votes we got on the ACA?
3.5. Because are we counting Arlen Specter as a Republican or not?
Well, he was a Democrat.
Oh, he'd already flipped?
Yeah.
Okay, so then 2.
Okay, 2.
And only one of them is left, right?
So before John Delaney even gets to the premise of his weak tea proposal, he has already basically completely fabricated some notion as to what is necessary to get his weak tea proposal passed.
Centrists
and
are
that
the
is
fantasists.
Bipartisan support for transformative. I mean, if he ever makes it to the debate stage again, I'd like someone to say, like, do you not think the ACA was transformative? Because he will eat his tie before he says, well, no, it was transformative, but it was transformative. It was pre-transformative.
He might just eat his tie.
Right. Let's just go backwards here and just hear that one predicate he laid there. That is really the essence of his whole answer.
Can I just say, like, I'm looking at like the history of bipartisan, Congresses, and they mention the 83, 85 to 85 Congress as like a hallmark. And here's some of the successes there. Declaration of Martin Luther King's birthday, which is good, although we know there were some holdouts on the Republican side.
John McCain.
Shut the fuck up.
Amendments to Social Security to preserve the pension system solvency.
The raising taxes on workers.
A major revision to the federal criminal code that included increased penalties penalties for drug trafficking and terrorism.
Sweet.
And reduction of the deficit through a package of spending cuts and tax hikes.
Yes, that's transformative. We are completely transformative.
It might be transformative.
Oh, but wait a second. You know, it's another transformative. What was that one that made sure that we didn't have poll taxes anymore in the country? Was that slightly transformative? Oh, yes, the Voting Rights Act. When that passed, was that bipartisan?
I mean,
well, the Voting
was
Rights Act
remember.
was
I guess we lost a lot
let's do this. Let's historicize it. If it was voted today, no, it would be all totally Democrat Republican, but it was geographically split down.
That's
so
true.
You
It was more
basically
split.
it was
Fair
Northern
enough.
Republicans back.
Fair enough.
Look,
Yes.
we've seen
We lost all the
transformative
Democrats.
stuff.
All of the Democrats that voted against it are now Republicans.
That's true.
Welfare reform and the crime bill were bipartisan, right? And they were transformative,
Well, that
but
is
in
the
a
other,
bad way.
That is the other point. Whenever they get together and do something bipartisan, that's
It's
bad
usually
news
bad.
for human beings.
But let's go backwards here. And so he's wrong, anyways, about transformative laws requiring bipartisanship. The ACA, considered by conventional wisdom to be a transformative bill. It certainly expanded Medicaid. It arguably made the case. It certainly changed the quality of insurance on some level if you don't measure it by affordability. It provided at least a baseline for what constitutes decent coverage. Not a terribly high baseline, but it's a higher baseline. But go ahead.
Done in the Congress of the United States by passing laws. And the best way to pass big transformative laws is to get bipartisan support. So I introduced the only bipartisan bill on climate. It was a carbon fee and dividend, which Chris and I just talked about. And it had Democrats and Republicans in equal number. And I think it's a template for what I'll do as president in my first year.
Let me follow up on that legislation. So that didn't get a vote.
Didn't get a vote, but I got Republicans on a carbon fee, which, by the way, is also known as a carbon tax.
Right. How many?
Well, we introduced it 3 and 3.
3 and 3. I mean, that is impressive, but it's so far from the reality of the political system, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the point is the leadership. And again,
got 3 members of the House.
Every single person who says this and every single person who's dealing with the problem. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it is the case that John Boehner, of course, never would bring that to the floor in the same way that Mitch McConnell will never bring a piece of climate legislation to the floor unless he thinks he can kill it and make a point.
Right. So that's why we have to win the House and the Senate. But even when we win the House and the Senate, we've got to put forth things that can get broad support.
I like that he basically got the type of co-sponsorship that you can just go and be like, dude, come on, buddy. You and I both know this isn't going anywhere. We've got a golf game this weekend. Will you co-sign in a bill? It might even prove handy for you in some random interview that you have bipartisan credentials.
I would go even further and say it's the conversation could also have easily been like, Exxon's going to throw us a couple of bones if we put this out there
100%.
so that we have something
there it
is
is. Now you're thinking.
A C block, if you know what I mean, for any real legislation. All we need is 6 guys to do this, and
it's bipartisan.
We're not going to have to make our phone calls this month.
Incidentally, I have a fantasy about running for president, and I'd like to mention this when I'm on MSNBC. I wish that kid ended in saying, by the way, Congressman Delaney, I have more followers on Instagram than you. Thank you.
He probably does.
I'm sure he does.
You got to appreciate Hayes's like sort of quiet skepticism, where he's like every question is asked, where you have the sense that he's holding back a laugh.
Oh yeah, you can see the look playing across his face. It's very clear.
This is interesting. When we talk about Joe Biden's desire to add a public option to the Affordable Care Act, even one that people could buy into, as opposed to just being limited, as the ACA is now, to people who don't have an option of getting health insurance through their employer or any other way, and subsidies only being available up to a certain percentage of wealth in this country, certain percentage of poverty. And the idea that, costs are crazy. The real question is like, how do you cut costs? Well, here is the former Medicare administrator, Dr. Don Berwick. He was this is under Obama. He explains why the public option at a House hearing will not be sufficient for containing medical costs.
I'm a little worried about the public option for a kind of technical reason. Insurance companies want to provide insurance to people that don't need it. That's how they make money. And so anything that can be done to game risk so that
public option would be used by all the people who really need the insurance
and
the
if
most.
I were insurance companies would then try to find ways to have people who really need care go to the public option, which would enrich it'd be a good business case for them, and that's not good for the country.
So look, I mean, this is an extension of the argument as to why you can have private insurance if you have Medicare for all. It just needs to be supplemental to what is offered in the context of Medicare for all. And because if you have it compete with Medicare for all, the insurance companies are going to try, and I don't know if they'd be able to do it if Medicare for all existed and you still had competing insurance. I mean, I guess in my mind, it's an open question. For some, it's not. As to whether you would have enough people who enter into the Medicare for all program so that the risk pool, that is all the people who are involved in the program, is the risk is dispersed amongst more people. The whole nature of insurance in terms of health anyways, and probably other, I mean, this is just the way insurance works. It's a small number of people who are going to be responsible for the highest number of costs. But the point is, we don't know who those people will be over the course of a lifetime. Now, once you've identified them, if you're the insurance company and you want to insure people, you want to make sure those people are not part of your risk pool. And you want to offload them. And if you offload them into a system where only a certain number of people are paying into the system because they're buying in as opposed to it being taxation on everyone, you'll have a higher percentage of people who will need the service, and that's when insurance breaks down. So I think the question of private insurance is overblown. Everybody needs to pay into the system. If they want to get a different insurance program, that's fine. But I also think you need to make like the vast majority of doctors and service providers also be part of the system. And that's easy to do, I think. You can't be, you can't get accreditation unless you take a certain percentage of Medicare patients. And at that point, if everybody's paying in and everybody has access to the same doctors, really doesn't matter, in my mind, what happens with private insurance or not. But
Natalie Shore actually, though, made some really important points about this, that it basically, if you still have a system where doctors, and she's much heavier in the details, I think, probably than any of us, certainly me.
Oh, yeah.
You still have
She's
a
a wonk on
system.
Medicare for
She's
all.
brilliant. And if you have a system where basically you need to have the doctors only billed to Medicare, essentially, because that cuts there's additional, like the real clarifying distinction of Medicare for all is free at the point of entrance, right? Like you just need to have a system that eliminates the possibility of people having to pay deductibles and copays when they actually seek treatment. We all understand that, it goes through the tax dollars, of course, but it needs to eliminate the capacity of the system to charge people at the point of purchase or create any additional layers of bureaucracy. So, I mean, her argument basically is like, sure, if there wants to be like a private insurance plan that deals with things that are not primary essential medical care, like that maybe deals with,
facelifts, let's say.
Sure.
Right.
That's when we can sure, that's okay. But you cannot have, her view is that it jeopardizes the whole thing.
Well, because you don't want doctors to opt out of the system.
Precisely.
Well, but
So
what I'm
you
saying
need
is
to have it filter through the system to do
there
it.
are other mechanisms that you can use to ensure that they have to be part of the system. I mean, right now it's arguable as to whether trap laws are legal to inhibit your ability to get have access to the constitutional right of abortion. Right? Like if Texas, this one was struck down, although I question as to whether the next one will be, can say that you need to have 16-foot ceilings to perform abortions, and otherwise you're not allowed to perform abortions in these offices. seems to me that you can say, like, if you're going to be licensed as a doctor, part of that licensing requirement is you must accept 85% Medicare patients, 90% Medicare patients. Maybe, and then boom, you want to hold private insurance? God bless you. But maybe it's for when you go into the hospital that you get like a gold-plated bedpan or something like that. But I think broadly speaking, there are other ways to do that, I think, is my point. Now, maybe it would be harder to do it that way. I'm not convinced that it would be. I think at that point, you would see private insurance go extinct more or less on its own. I mean, it's not a terribly viable business as it stands unless they can be guaranteed to offload the sickest people. And in this instance, it wouldn't be an opportunity to do it. It wouldn't hurt the funding because everybody would have to pay the taxes regardless of whether you are involved in the system or not. If there is a problem with requiring doctors to take a certain number of Medicare patients as a function of their licensing, I'm not aware of it. But
yeah, it seems like that's a good argument for Medicare for All being a non-reformist reform, which is to say a reform that picks up its own speed and causes a chain reaction of things going in the direction we want to go. So like, for example, like you just said, private insurers go out of business. People aren't using them anymore. It's not because we made a law against them. It's because this is what the reforms triggered. We have basically taken their space to perform profitably away from them. And I mean, the only reason why, I think just from a political standpoint, on some level, it makes it easier. But I don't know, maybe there is a reason why you can't compel doctors to take Medicare, but it seems to me, you could do it in terms of hospitals. You absolutely could. I do worry what's going to happen with specialists right now that don't take insurance at all. But I imagine it would have hopefully a positive effect because the bureaucracy right now of dealing with insurance companies is just so much that the best doctors don't have to do it. So they just won't. Right. Like I see a specialist that doesn't take insurance and it sucks. Been there. Meanwhile, Mayor Pete decides that Mayor Pete, I think, is feeling some of his viability, and he needs to find a lane. And I think he thinks it's somewhere between being the young Biden and being the not quite Warren. And so here he is trying to worm his way in there. And really, the whole point of Warren's tact on this, and I do think that there is, you could critique it, I guess, in terms of framing, but I like the idea of taxes losing their special place in where as a cost of being a citizen is somehow, and living in the country, just like literally living, is somehow uniquely bad.
Yeah, don't reinforce Grover Norquist's work.
Uniquely expensive. Like where $1 of taxes is magically worth like $2 of paying for, I don't know, food or home heating or some other requirement like electricity. Like, look, you can say there's no electricity tax, but of course there is. No one lives without electricity. You got to pay for it.
Yeah, but then you might end up subsidizing poor people's electricity. Right.
Well, I guess that's maybe part of it. But the fact is, everybody pays for it. Everybody pays for electricity. That's a cost that's generally associated with probably your wealth. You have a bigger house, you have more electricity bill. But Mayor Pete sees an opening here, and he's going to take it regardless.
Senator Warren is known for being straightforward and was extremely evasive when asked that question. And we've seen that repeatedly. I think that if you are proud of your plan,
just to be clear, the thing that she's supposedly being evasive about is, will her plan raise taxes? And look, of course it's going to raise taxes. But the point is will it lower costs? And the question is asked in a certain way. If the question is always, will it raise taxes? You're immediately saying that's the most relevant part, because it never will it lower costs. When was the last time you heard Joe Biden or someone who like Mayor Pete ask the question, will it lower costs? Will it lower costs? That is the most relevant thing.
Why do they have to be so roundabout about it?
Exactly. Like, why is it like a bank shot of like, well, what will be the distribution of costs? Right? Like, why don't you ask it that? Like, what's the distribution of costs now? Like, what is the cost structure now versus later? No, it's will it cost more or less?
I think that if you are proud of your plan and it's the right plan, you should defend it in straightforward terms. And I think it's puzzling that when everybody knows the answer to that question of whether her plan and Senator Sanders' plan will raise middle-class taxes is yes, why you wouldn't just say so and then explain why you think that's the better way forward. Our plan...
Pause it. What do you mean the better way forward? If you're going to be straightforward when you answer this question, it should be, of course it raises taxes, but of course... out-of-pocket costs are less, so it's a savings. Like, I mean, if you're going to say she should be straightforward when she discusses the plan, you should be straightforward.
Instead of acting puzzled.
Right, I'm completely confused by this.
And then explain why you think that's the better way forward. Our plan does not require raising middle-class taxes. It does create a way for everybody to be covered, and I think that's what most Americans want. Look, people are used to Washington politicians not giving straight answers to simple questions, but at a time like this, on an issue this important, that's exactly what we need.
Now, I'm sure Jake Tapper's next question is, but does your program lower costs, period? Costs for the consumer? For every single consumer, does it lower costs, period? We want to get straightforward. That's the straightforward question. That's the straightforward answer. It is like, I mean, is there anything more obnoxious, honestly, than saying like they're not being straightforward and then being that sort of disingenuous in your critique? This guy's from this is IDW stuff.
Tapper
he is the
loved
most
it.
disingenuous person running for president, I think, hands down.
But he's so smart.
He's a smart guy. He's a smart guy.
As Cornel West says, we need to overcome the cult of smartness. Also, I don't really know how smart is.
I mean, I think he's a smart guy. I mean, I think Tom Cotton's a smart guy too.
I think there's plenty
of
and there's also like plenty of people who I would describe as smart enough. So what?
Smartness is a privilege laundered through education.
Yeah, that too. He's book smart.
Ladies and gentlemen,
many kinds of smarts.
I've been very clear over the years on how, for at least a time, and I will concede it was only a brief window of time. If anyone saw that documentary on McGovern called The Bright Shining Moment. Well, we had another bright shining moment. That, of course, was when and Scalia passed away. And
it was a great
public
day.
Sector unions were spared in the, was it the Friedrichs case? Yes, in the Friedrichs case. Sadly, that seat was never filled, and we got that case again in Janus. But just because Antonin Scalia is gone doesn't mean that he didn't spawn a lot of bad things. One of them is now our labor secretary. His name is Eugene Scalia.
Okay, well, I'm the lead sponsor of
Pause
the
it for 1 second. And he is being questioned by Senator Patty Murray. This is a confirmation hearing. He's the nominee, I should say. This is a combination. Now, you remember the last labor secretary we had, right? Didn't he have to resign? Was it because, I know, he gave a sweetheart deal to a pedophile child sex trafficker. This is a hearing where Patty Murray is talking about the Paycheck Fairness Act, which is a proposed U.S. labor law that would add protections to the Equal Pay Act, which was passed in the early 60s, and the Fair Labor Standards Act, so as to address the gender gap in pay. And here's Eugene Scalia's response to Patty Murray.
Okay, well, I'm the lead sponsor of the Paycheck Fairness Act. It's a bill that would close that pay gap. The House passed it earlier this year. Would you support passage of the Paycheck Fairness Act?
Ranking Member Murray, I support fairness in pay and fair working conditions for women. It's something that in my work at my law firm as a manager of employees was important to me, and in advising clients.
But you won't commit today to supporting that bill.
I will commit to two things, Ranking Member Murray. I can commit to providing any resources the Senate might find helpful in deliberating that legislation. And if it becomes law, which is, of course, your decision, the Senate's decision, Congress's and the President's, if it becomes law, I certainly promise to vigorously enforce it.
I just want everybody to know that if these historic trends continue, it's going to be 75 years before that gap gets any better.
Why would you want a Secretary of Labor who would want to promote labor laws which guarantee no gender discrimination in terms of pay? That's so out of the bounds of what we would expect from a labor secretary.
Oh, but he's fair to the women who work for him, so.
Yes.
Here's what I'll tell you, Senator. The ladies that work for me are very fucking courteous. As far as the other thing, I don't want a totalitarian government, so no. Trying not to create the Soviet Union over here.
It's very magnanimous of him to say that if you pass a law, I won't just ignore it.
By the way, if you put in the work, if you and the ladies get down there together in the boiler room and you coordinate your friggin' cycles and you pass it, I won't ignore Congress. By the way, that is a very nice nail job you have. I would just like that to be noted.
It's really generous of him.
Super generous. Here is the conservative wonder kid, Dan Crenshaw.
Former Facebook administrator.
Former owner of Two Eyes.
Who is... Here is Dan
Jamie
Crenshaw.
finally speaking my humor language.
Here is Dan Crenshaw, who makes, obviously, a lot of hay in the media out of being a vet. He was wounded in service. And the implication is that because he's a vet, his proclamations deserve just a slightly special status in our society. That because he has sacrificed as a vet, that he somehow has a status that is a little bit rarefied. That we all owe him a little bit more attention and seriousness, I guess. Then I can understand that sentiment. Certainly, folks who have gone to war and become injured have sacrificed quite a bit. I think on some level they should be more upset about those people who sent them off there. But Dan Crenshaw, I mean, the reason why he gets a lot of this attention, again, because he's an injured vet, had this to say on Twitter: watching Bernie pander to different groups to get their vote has always disgusted me, but now it's personal. I didn't go to war so that you could take care of me, Bernie. I went to war to serve our country, and our country needed it. And this is the sentiment that where Crenshaw will rely on his status as a vet to sort of pierce through, right? Like, he's not just a pedestrian walking by. He is a vet, and you must listen to vets unless you're Dan Crenshaw.
Like, how can you let a criminal like Donald Trump run roughshod over our democracy and shred everything that you and I fought for? Like, come on, man. Like, how can you just sit there idly by and not do your duty? We need your leadership right now. Right? You cannot be complicit in this man's crimes. It is immoral. It's laid out clearly in the Mueller report, sir. You know, like you are not stepping up to the plate. Like, we need your leadership now. Like, come on, you're just not going to. Like, come on. Like, it's hurting our bodies and minds. Come on, like, how are you going to let him just cozy up to dictators? How are you going to just let him lock kids in cages? Like, come on, dude. You need to calm down. Are you kidding me? You need to get your courage back. Come on. We need you. You're going to talk to me about that? We need you. Yes, we are talking about you. Fellow combat veteran. Yelling at civilians. You know, like, I fought in Iraq. He fought in Afghanistan. Come on, man. Like, we need you. We are asking you for your leadership. We're not trying to attack you. Read the Mueller report. Like, read. Yes, absolutely. There are 10 impeachable obstruction offenses, sir. Like, come on. Can I come down? Come on.
This is members only. This is a members only elevator.
You're not going to let a fellow veteran get talking to you? You got to make the elevator with the fellow veteran.
You got to make your video. You got to make your video. You didn't come here to have a conversation.
I do want to have a conversation.
As veterans, we should be smarter about how we talk about things.
Look,
it's members only elevator.
You don't want to be held accountable by fellow veterans, Congressman?
Yes, I got you. Here. Go ahead. Go. You don't have video anymore. Oh, I thought we were going to have a real conversation for a second. I told you,
you're going to let a criminal get away with our democracy.
Again,
he is a criminal.
You repeating things is not a conversation.
If I did half the things he has done, I would be in Leavenworth. I would be underneath Leavenworth, sir. Like, you would be too. You can't let this happen. You're going to let a criminal hijack our democracy. This is your duty. I'm here doing my duty.
There you go. That was pretty effective, I thought. Dan Crenshaw just wants to have a conversation. It's weird how they all retreat into that.
I like Felix Biederman pointed out about Dan Crenshaw that just like in like Brooklyn, there's a bunch of like kind of annoying people that sort of like put on the affect of being like a tortured novelist or something when they're not. There's a lot of people from, rich people from Dallas basically that really want to like cosplay as being like, like macho. And they're not.
It's not just from.
Well,
Texas,
but he was just giving you that like that solid contract. Well, that's in fact where Dan Crenshaw's from, and Dan Crenshaw's a rich kid, and I understand that he chose to like go overseas for whatever disturbing reasons he might have wanted to go overseas for. But at the end of the day, like, of course he can screw over fellow veterans. He doesn't have any financial stakes in anything.
Yeah, no.
He's fine.
He's wrapping himself in the pageantry that we have around the troops, which I would argue is very destructive in this country. But when push comes to shove, of course he's not going to have solidarity with his fellow troops. That's ridiculous.
There it is, folks.
It's a checkpoint.
I think on some level, though, you have to give kudos to Crenshaw for saying, look, just because you're a vet doesn't mean that we have to listen to you.
Yeah.
And so
it's a good point.
That's the lesson learned. Dan Crenshaw.
You can't resist, Dad. I've got to take care of you.
Yeah, we don't do standpoint epistemology in the members only elevator.
Exactly. I will say this. It would have been my entire opinion of him would have changed had he said that. I would have been very impressed.
Same.
Honestly, that would have been pretty great. Just because you and I share the vet, we can have different ideas about America. And that's not the video camera I would use either. It doesn't have the low light rating that I would want. Here is Ben Shapiro. This is a beautiful genre. This is clip number 13. This is a beautiful genre of right-wing talking. You know, this is where Ben Shapiro reminds me of Rush Limbaugh. There was I used to listen to Limbaugh quite a bit back in the day when I would do a 7 to 10 or a 6 to 9 radio show. And I distinctly remember an episode, and this must have been somewhere around the mid-aughts, where I'm listening to him, and he is talking about tinfoil, essentially tinfoil being placed on a glacier, I think it was in Switzerland. And because it was melting, and he was reading, and I do the same thing. I have stories that I've picked out, and I highlight them in yellow. And I think he probably had a production crew that at that point would highlight the stories in yellow. He never read through them. He'd see the headline. And he was basically making the argument that environmentalist tree huggers had gone crazy. They are so convinced of this hoax about global warming that they have put tinfoil on a glacier. That's how insane these environmentalists have gone. And he reads on. Environmentalists were upset about the tinfoil that was placed on the glacier by the owners of the ski resort who were trying to maintain the ice in warming conditions.
Ski owners are nuts.
We got to take a break. We'll be right back. He hadn't read the whole thing.
Crazy.
He hadn't read the thing.
Clearly.
And didn't realize that the story actually proved the exact opposite of what he was talking about.
I can relate.
Which was that, in fact, global warming was impacting the capitalists who own the ski resort. And environmentalists were like, hey, this is going to be damaging to the environment that you're trying to prevent the water flows, and you're contaminating some of this runoff water. And he just misread it. I imagine on some level, that's what Ben Shapiro did here in some way. But of course, he doesn't have the full story. He's just sort of winging it. He's just doing the classic right-wing play, which is anything that is in any way new or different than what you've experienced is by definition completely wacko. You've been living your life where every day, you know, your coffee's on your left and your water's on your right, and someday you show up at work and it's mixed up. And that means that, of course, they're coming to get you. By them, I mean the Muslims or the gays or the transgenders or the whoever it is. And Ben knows who his audience is. They're old people who just don't have the, or they're closed-minded people who just don't have the ability to even be aware that people are identifying themselves in a pronoun that may seem in some way alien to them. But instead, he needs to make it about science because he doesn't seem to understand that what language is.
The polarization of the American public continues apace, with woke scolds doing their best to ruin every aspect of American life. I'm very excited that Merriam-Webster Dictionary has now added the non-binary pronoun they to the dictionary. Because when I look at a book for definitions of words, what I want is a made-up definition of a word that has never been used this way in all of human history, a plural noun used as a singular noun to refer
Pause
to
it. Well, put aside the pettiness of like the idea that there could be a new word, which incidentally, woke scolds, I do not believe you would find in the dictionary. Which I find very polarizing, that all of a sudden he's using a word I've never heard before. But wait a sec, keep that up because, I'll go right here to, he's complaining about the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Well, the Oxford English Dictionary at its blog writes that it traces the singular they back to 1375. Yes, where it appears in the medieval romance William and the Werewolf. On top of which, they argue that if it's in writing in 1375, it was likely in oral use way before then.
The werewolf is a non-binary species.
Yes, it's likely that the singular they was common even before the late 14th century. That makes it an old form even older. In the 18th century, grammarians began warning that singular they was an error because a plural pronoun can't take a singular antecedent. They clearly forgot that singular you was in fact a plural pronoun that had become singular as well. You functioned as a polite singular for centuries, but in the 17th century, singular you replaced thou, thee, and thy, except for some dialect use. And then it just goes on to talk about how at different times people have had different perspectives on this. But let's let Ben continue with his completely unfounded assertion that this is the first time a plural term has been used in the form of the singular since the dawn of man.
Of a word that has never been used this way in all of human history, a plural noun used as a singular noun to refer to a singular gender. We're going to use a plural noun. And Merriam-Webster is going to go along with this, which just demonstrates once and for all that logic has gone out the window. People are tailoring science to meet politically correct demands. People are tailoring.
I would say also, this is not science to me. This is language. Language to me. Can we come up with other ways in which we call for language to reflect a political perspective? Yes, we can, because it happens every day on all sides of politics. In fact, wake scold is a word that fits his political ideology and is, I would add, made up.
Yeah. There's some logic. Is what is not a made-up word?
Exactly. There's all these words, like the idea that we could just have a printing press and create words.
Language to meet politically correct demands. Merriam-Webster, according to the Washington Post, has added a new definition of the word they to its dictionary, declaring the pronoun may be used to refer to a single person whose gender identity is non-binary. They, according to the Washington Post, is a liberating pronoun for many non-binary individuals. What the hell is a liberating pronoun? How does a pronoun liberate you? Were you in shackles and then someone said they and now you're out of the shackles? What kind of nonsense?
Here is where Ben doesn't seem to understand the concept of metaphor. Obviously, you are not in physical shackles, but to the extent that language can restrict you, and in fact, that's what it is, right? Language is a definition. By definition, a word defines you. And if you feel that the pronoun in some way defines you in a way that is not accurate as to your definition of self, then they would be liberated.
Was Ben being shackled when The Economist called him alt-right?
I guess he had to unshackle himself from that limited definition.
How does a pronoun liberate you? Were you in shackles and then someone said they and now you're out of the shackles? What kind of nonsense is this? For many Americans, the use of they as a singular pronoun can be ungrammatical and confusing. That would not be for many Americans. That would be for all Americans, unless you're talking about the small group of SJWs who decide we have to redefine all of language in order to meet politically correct demands. It is insane. And then you wonder why the same people who demand truth, absolute truth. We're the media and we want the truth. Also, they is a singular pronoun. Not what now?
All right. Look, a lot of people I know at this point expect me to comment on his inability to deliver like a decent comedic double take. A lot of people think it's easier than that. You know, he obviously can't. He does like a triple take.
Should we try to take another look here?
Yeah, let's try. Let's just look at it. Only because I made quite a bit of money doing a double take on many sitcoms. Ben, incapable of doing it. I don't want to get caught up on this, but it is worth looking at again.
Also, they is a singular pronoun. Not what now?
I mean, there's a
See
lot
why
of different
Ben
ways
had
that you
trouble
can...
selling those scripts.
What? That's one way of doing it. There's a lot of different ways. I got a special glasses version on the double take. But can you imagine how disturbing it would be to see in print the idea of they being used to communicate the notion of a singular person. Like the idea that they could refer to one.
No.
Any one person referring to themselves as they would be extremely disturbing to see it in print. For instance, let's look at this Ben Shapiro tweet. Click on this. Here it is. If anyone on the right suggested that Fredo is the N-word for Italians or that fake news is the N-word for journalists, they'd be correctly run out of town on a rail of insensitivity. I'm sorry. If anyone, meaning an individual,
does not compute,
that's so strange.
It's bull crap. It's confusing. I don't know what it even means.
It's the first time in history that's ever happened.
That is the first time in history, except for that was back in 2019. And then back in 2016, as Emanzadi said, telling a Trump fan, they're being conned is like telling your friend not to marry a stripper. Now, your friend is singular, as a Trump fan is singular, then why are we referring to them as they? Booge. Exactly. Oh, I know why. Because their gender is maybe non-binary in the context of that. That Trump fan could be male or female. Interesting. And I loved Lost, he wrote back in 2010, but dude, period. Can anybody get a happy ending while they're alive? Can anybody, not anybody's, can folks get a happy no, it is when an individual. Fascinating.
I literally, okay. I actually thought Ben was, I thought Ben was trying to make a joke.
Oh, yeah, no.
He was like, let me try my hand at comedy.
Is
it really a happy ending? You're still
so-
alive? What about the cleanup process?
So
the whole thing is bullcrap.
It's almost like he doesn't really care about the grammar.
Here's one more time. LOL, David Limbaugh, if anyone.
Imagine doing that.
That
in
is
life.
funny. That's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny.
If anyone thinks this president believes in the Second Amendment, they're nuts. I need to rest after that. It is so taxing to see they refer back to a singular person. Fascinating. A singular person. It's just, wow.
Donald Trump is the only conservative who understands comedy and language.
That's true.
It's true.
It's remarkable that
he's incredible. I actually understands it better than most liberals, in fact. And then besides that, it's just completely a desert.
I mean, to be fair, Ben Shapiro's a philosopher and not a linguist.
That's true. He is
Not the
more
cool
known
kid's
for
linguist.
the precision. Yes, he is the precision of his logic, not his language.
Folks,
Which are, of course, not connected.
You'll recall that some time ago, a bunch of morons felt it necessary to have a straight pride parade in Boston. Now, look, I grew up in Massachusetts. I grew up around D-bags like this all the time, so I'm not in any way disturbed by them. I feel comfortable around them. Maybe at times I was one of them. Not quite like these guys, but in my own way.
Let's go to the straight pride parade.
And I certainly, look, I am in favor of people being able to do hijinks to prove their political point, even if their political point is one that one usually experiences as a 12-year-old boy, and then you grow out of it by, I don't know, late in your 12th year. Somewhere like around 12 and a half, you grow out of these things. Like these ideas like, hey, what about straight? Oh, yeah, okay, whatever. These guys obviously did not. They didn't handle this very well. It was really, in many ways, a disaster. Let's just listen to this question that was asked of these three stooges by Brian Riccio, who is, I think he's a local reporter. And it turns out to be a fairly salient question.
The United States. So that's what we know so far. It's our first parade, so who knows? If it was just me and Mark, we said we're going to march. It doesn't matter. We have a point to make, and we think it's okay to be straight. That's all, and there's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't make you a hater. And if people are saying that, it's just bizarre. What the heck's wrong with being straight? We think it's great to be straight. We say don't hate the straight.
We have to say that the taxpayers are upset that city resources are going to be wasted because you three guys can't get laid.
Funny is
What
that?
kind of question is
What
that?
are you, an idiot?
No,
You are an idiot.
You've had your question.
You're an
already.
idiot.
These are following.
You said I had a heckler's right, didn't
Go back
I?
to Philadelphia, your girlfriend. What's her name again in Philadelphia? Your girlfriend's, what's her name?
What?
Please, Rob, stop interrupting, please.
Shithead.
I'm sorry, what, sir? What?
Okay, no more questions for this guy. He's not a serious reporter.
Actually, it turns
He's
out
not asking
right.
serious questions.
He's
of
not
the straight
asking serious
pride.
questions of the straight pride with the guy here in Santa Claus outfit holding the iPhone, who is revealing the fact that they had done some research and spied on the guy and found out that his girlfriend was in Philadelphia, I think. Nevertheless, the question actually was a very legit question because now we know how much that cost. Boston police had to pay, or it cost the taxpayers over $30,000 to deal with those, 100 people, not even, who showed up for that dumb parade. I just, ridiculous. Oh, wait a second. What's this?
Oh, wow. What's this total?
This is more.
Overtime.
Holy smokes.
Oh.
Yeah, that wasn't the total.
Whoa.
That was just for the barriers.
I'm sorry. That was the barriers. It turns out you got to pay for the barrier truck and the event activity. The overtime cost was $611,000. So the entire Straight Pride Parade cost the city of Boston $640,000.
You know, the sad part is there are probably cops who would have showed up for free to that.
Right, it's probably true. That's probably true. But the amazing thing is like, you know, like of all the complaining they do about like the special rights that gay people have in our society, the special secret rights that they have.
How their speech is suppressed.
Yeah. There you go.
Speech is
$640,000 for that complete waste of time.
Do we know how many people showed up to this thing?
I think it was like literally like 100.
So that's about $60,000 per person?
Yeah.
Or
I'm quite convinced if you had given everybody $600, they would have stayed home. You could have saved the city like $700,000.
Man,
I'm sure there's no better use of the money for that.
It's good time to be in the barrier delivery business, I think.
I was going to say, maybe this whole thing is just a giant false flag for stimulative spending. I've all of a sudden gotten super sympathetic to this. Whole bunch of guys got overtime, good economic activity.
What kind of guys?
I'll tell you what I would do.
Hey,
I'll tell you what I would do if I owned a barrier, the barrier company.
I would make my
I'd be doing
employees
a lot of protest.
I'd be like, yeah, you know what, guys? It's time to put on the Magic the Gathering suits again. And some straight Pride Parade flags, and let's go out and do some business.
Right wingers are just subsidized by barrier companies.
Yeah,
we
that's
should
the real
investigate the
conspiracy.
ties between these organizers and the barrier companies.
All
There
right,
might be
folks.
something there.
Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to fire up the IMs, and I'm going to take the first 10 IMs that come in on the Majority app before we go. I have not. What? This is good. Saul Seder on the IM. First into the. Hi, Dad. I wanted to announce that Michael offered me a weekly segment on his show called The Dinosaur Minute with Saul.
I actually do.
Patreon.com/TMBS.
Yeah,
See you at home.
It's patron content.
Yeah, it's patron-only content.
Oh, my God.
I give the kid a cut with some juice boxes, and he has a lot of dirt on you, doggy.
I got to say,
That's an
that
amazing
actually
idea.
is an interesting idea, and I have the inside track to him.
That's what you think.
Well, how about these are Saul? You know those episodes you like to watch of Super Friends? And guess what? Not going to happen unless you work for me.
He comes over, he goes, hey, how's everybody doing? Let's talk dinosaurs. By the way, it's a dad night, so let's record late.
Sam's Tinder profile. Yeah, exactly. Hey, babe, swipe right for a backstage pass to the only show that matters, The Majority Report with Sam Seder. All right. A Square. Oh, my God. Sam listening to Myla, remembering her singing moves like Jagger, now climate change activist. Can we Cedaristas be more proud? Indeed. Thank you, A Square. Winnipeg Craig. Sam, I think the thing about the Philadelphia girlfriend from the Straight Pride Parade was a homophobic joke. Philadelphia girlfriend, i.e. his boyfriend. That's why the other guy cut him off.
Right-wing comedy is tough, man.
That is.
Unless you're Trump.
What is a Philadelphia girlfriend is his boyfriend? I don't get it.
I don't get it either.
Yeah, I don't know.
I enjoyed the meme that, like, it's the two arms clasping each other, and on one side it says Gay Pride Parade, on the other side it says Straight Pride Parade, and in the middle it says not making women come.
Thames Darwin. Sam, you may recall that I teach. I'm writing to let you know I was able to use the phrase zero-sum game during a lecture. I'm pretty happy about it. Getting ready to start introducing Social Security actuarial tables next week. I hear those are very popular with the kids these days. That's my understanding. Fraud save America. Roses are red, sheep follow the leader. Hey, IDW, debate, Sam from The Majority Report. Steph from Chicago, I just want to say regards to my call yesterday. I was troubled by some audience members' reactions. I do not believe anyone in the studio displayed violent hatred towards Elizabeth Warren, and I would like to distance myself from that kind of language. I hope you allow me to call in again about it once I've done some reading. Love you all. Keep up the good work.
Much love.
It was a commenter who said...
It was just somebody being crazy. No one, it wasn't anybody calling or anything. Can I read what Trump said about de Blasio leaving the race? May I?
Yes.
All right. Oh, no. Really big news. Perhaps the biggest story in years. Part-time mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, who was polling at a solid 0, all capital, at a solid 0, but had tremendous room for growth, has shockingly dropped out of the presidential race. NYC is devastated. He's coming home.
When he's on, he's on.
Slay King.
Yeah. You guys got to get out there and make Bernie win these early primaries.
Let's play this clip of Trump. This is important, actually, addressing the whistleblower. Now, the whistleblower is in the Intel Committee. They've been there, obviously, throughout, I would imagine, at least these 3 years of Donald Trump. And they have, according to the Inspector General, made a complaint that is urgent, worthy of triggering the mandatory reporting to the House. Here's Donald Trump referring to it, and I got to imagine that they may be a little bit nervous about this one. Now, once they stop and they think about it, and they think about how Nancy Pelosi doesn't seem to want to pursue anything like this, I'm sure they'll be fine. But at one point, I think it's going to be quite clear that they realize they can get away with anything because they're not going to be held to account. This is a problem, folks.
Story, sir. You want to address this whistleblower story? What story? The whistleblower, whether it was ridiculous story. It's a partisan whistleblower. They shouldn't even have information. I've had conversations with many leaders that are always appropriate. I think Scott can tell you that. Always appropriate, at the highest level, always appropriate. And anything I do, I fight for this country. I fight so strongly for this country. It's just another political hack job. That's all it is.
On that point, did you discuss Joe Biden, his son, or his family with the leadership?
It doesn't matter what I discuss, but I will say this. Somebody ought to look into Joe Biden's statement because it was disgraceful, where he talked about billions of dollars that he's not giving to a certain country unless a certain prosecutor is taken off the case. So somebody ought to look into that, and you wouldn't because he's a Democrat. And the fake news doesn't look into things like that. It's a disgrace. But I had a great conversation with numerous people. I don't even know exactly who you're talking about, but I had a great conversation with.
I have no idea who you're talking about. I just guessed. I just was talking about the Ukraine, but I had no idea what you're talking about because I didn't do it. So I wouldn't know. And of course, I want to make it clear that when I couldn't have talked about anything that would benefit me, because I always talk about stuff that would benefit the country.
I didn't say Joe Biden. You said Joe Biden, but they should go after Joe Biden.
That's right. I have no idea why you'd bring up Joe Biden in this context, but except for the fact that, like with the Ukraine, but I have no idea who you're talking about country-wise. So, yeah.
Could have been
Numerous
any
people,
Ukraine.
Numerous leaders. And I always look for the conversation that's going to help the United States the most. That's very important.
Do you know the identity of the whistleblower? Do you know the identity?
I don't know the identity of the whistleblower. I just hear it's a partisan person, meaning it comes out from another party. But I don't have any idea. But I can say that it was a totally appropriate conversation. It was actually a beautiful conversation. And this is no different than, the press has had a very bad
Pause
week
it.
with
Here's a question. Like, if this guy was a normal human being and we had a normal politics, someone would say, like, how do you know it was a beautiful conversation? Which conversation are you talking about?
Because all my conversations are beautiful. How about that?
You don't know what country you're referring to, but you know it was a good conversation.
Let me look at my schedule today. I have a beautiful conversation scheduled with Iran. I have a beautiful conversation scheduled with Saudi Arabia. I have a beautiful conversation scheduled with Pakistan. Oh, and rounding it out, beautiful conversation with Ghana. Could be anyone.
Do you think he's also clever enough to say that, like, whenever I help me in some way, I'm helping America? So necessarily this call was about helping America? But just continue to hear him ramble.
It was actually a beautiful conversation.
With a country I don't know.
This is no
who.
different than, the press has had a very bad week with Justice Kavanaugh and all of those ridiculous charges and all of the mistakes made at the New York Times and other places. You've had a very bad week, and this will be better than all of them. This is another one. So keep playing it up, because you're going to look really bad when it falls. I guess I'm about 22-0, and I'll keep it that way.
You mentioned Joe Biden during the conversation.
I don't want to talk about any conversation other than to say, great conversation, totally appropriate conversation. Couldn't have been better.
Don't know who it was
keep
with.
Asking questions and build it up as big as possible so you can have a bigger downfall.
Yeah, and keep talking about this, because it's going to be really bad for you.
I actually want you to keep asking me about this.
In
please.
fact, I want you to continue to talk about it, and that's why I'm going to allow the whistleblower complaint to be released, because I don't know who said it. I don't know who the whistleblower is, but I gather that they're, of course, a Democrat, and I don't know what conversation it was about, but it was a great conversation.
It'll be so cool, though, if it actually was revealed. Like, I'm the Democratic whistleblower. All I do is blow whistles on Republicans because I'm a Democrat. Michael Brooks criticized Elizabeth Warren on the Majority Report. I mean, I am a Democratic whistleblower. Donald Trump. I'm the Democratic snitch. And all I do is complain all day.
10 more IMs, then we're out of here. Yesterday's sim turned yesterday's IM. Oh, that's right. Yesterday's IM turned show on only to hear Sam ask a child, how much do you guys fret about this? Train boy, it's my daughter. Believe me, she has exactly the same vocabulary that I do. Train boy, Jan Crenshaw picks the slime from his empty eye socket and wipes it on the underside of his congressional desk. Very disrespectful. That's sort of gross. Cauliflower, Justin Trudeau doing what he can to establish himself as Canada's Obama by any means necessary. Pajama boy. Eating Dave Rubin is the ultimate way to recover from all those high-level ideas. By the way, Rogan and Weinstein inadvertently dunked on Rubin in that clip by insinuating he can't think on the fly.
I don't know how inadvertent that was.
No.
That was very dunky. I didn't even realize. Yeah, that was just sort of like, so you're a total moron, and you're trying to talk without a script.
Stephen Velasco, it's so weird how many good guys with guns don't seem to mind implying bad guys with guns when a law changes and they might have to surrender some of their weapons. Indeed. Colorado guy, as long as polled voters' top concern is getting rid of Trump, the real likelihood of Trump winning a second term in 2020 remains more likely than not. If the desire to win is more of a priority than understanding how to win, why we actually lost in 2016, then Dems will either lose the election outright in 2020, but there'll be another reckoning in 2020 like 2010 with Obama, 2022 like Obama. Left is best, Little Livre. Yeah, I think it's just weird to talk about all the Democratic voters as if they have one mind that could be that agile. Like, like collectively, we all must understand how to be, I don't know. It's a weird way to phrase that stuff.
Well, they should care about winning, but they should also have a smart way to win.
Well, I think if you're choosing Biden to win, then you definitely, because you think he can win, then you definitely care about winning. I think like we have a different theory of how to win and what might be more problematic. And I think part of that is just because, like, you know, we're professionally watching this stuff.
Yeah, so listen to us, guys. We're right.
Bullprogs. Props to all the kids doing the climate marches. It's adorable. I'll play now. Work makes big sexy. I did not appreciate the kink shaming by the prank caller on Wednesday. Many people, totally not me, love that you look like a foot with glasses. Thank you. Neff. Myla did a fantastic job reporting for the climate march. She's grown up in such an intelligent young lady, such a knockus. Thank you, Neff. That's very sweet. Columbus Mike. I have a compelling evidence that Matt is 2 kids in a trench coat. PM me for details. Proletariats. We should hit fascists with cascarones instead of eggs and milkshakes. I love Sarah Palin. Since apparently our radio waves are transmitted through space, I want the aliens to know if they come here, they'll get stole on. We ain't sweet. Libertarian, karmatist, right-wingers don't get MTG. Portnoy, if you aren't familiar with Justin King, a.k.a. Bo, the Fifth Column on YouTube, he did a great short video sarcastically celebrating Kavanaugh's confirmation, contrasting the senseless tribalist framing the media uses to narrate important issues and walking through several of his judicial rulings that almost all members of the MAGA crowd would have been vehemently opposed to, and had said MAGA crowd spent any time objectively looking at Kavanaugh's record, they would likely have been opposed to his confirmation if it weren't just an own the limbs, he's our guy mentality. I will check that out. Ryan from Santa Monica, why is New York's registration end so long before the election? I believe California is 4 weeks, so it can't have anything to do with size. Is it just to disenfranchise voters? Yes. It's an incumbent protection racket, is what it is. That's what it is. Sorry about that. And Michael's impression of Sam, Ben Shapiro's wife here. Often he makes that face when he watches with another man. Congressional baseball fan. Today's show is brought to you by Southwest Airlines. We have no check bag fees, whites only segregated employee break rooms until 2018. Plus, we always ask mothers of mixed race children move their identities. We all do that with less baggage. That's why Southwest is proud to be the preferred airline of Congressman Steve Scalise. And the final I am of the day of the week. Should Trump lose the election next year, what lame duck policies he may enact before he's evicted and forcibly removed? I would imagine he would try and, I don't know, have an executive order that you can't force a president from leaving.
I'm going to stay anyway.
See you Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid.